Gollum got into his boat and shot off from the island, while Bilbo was sitting on the brink, altogether flummoxed and at the end of his way and his wits. Suddenly up came Gollum and whispered and hissed, "Bless us and splash us, my precious. I guess it's a choice feast. At least a tasty morsel. It'd make us Gollum." And when he said Gollum, he made a horrible swallowing noise in his throat. That is how he got his name, though he always called himself my precious. The hobbit jumped nearly out of his skin when the hiss came into his ears, and he suddenly saw pale eyes sticking out at him. "Who are you?" he said, thrusting his dagger in front of him. "What is he, my precious?" whispered Gollum, who always spoke to himself through never having anyone else to speak to. This is what he had come to find out, for he was not really very hungry at the moment, only curious. Otherwise, he would have grabbed first and whispered afterwards. "I am Mr. Bilbo Baggins. I have lost the dwarves, and I have lost the wizard. I don't know where I am, and I don't want to know if only I can get away." "What's he got in his hands?" said Gollum, looking at the sword, which he did not quite like. "A sword, a blade, came out of Gondolin," said Gollum, and became quite polite. "Perhaps he sits here and chats with it a bitsy, my precious. It likes riddles? Perhaps it does it?" He was anxious to appear friendly, at any rate for the moment, until he found out more about the sword and the hobbit, whether he was quite alone, really, whether he was good to eat, or whether Gollum was really hungry. Riddles were all he could think of, asking them, and sometimes guessing them. He had been the only game he had ever played with other funny creatures sitting in their holes in the long ago, before he lost all his friends and was driven away alone and crept down into the dark under the mountains. "Very well," said Bilbo, who was anxious to agree, until he found out more about the creature, whether he was quite alone, whether he was fierce or hungry, and whether he was a friend of the goblins. "You ask first," he said, because he has not had time to think of a riddle. So Gollum hissed, "What has roots and nobody sees, is taller than trees. Up it goes, and yet never grows." "Easy," said Bilbo. "Mountain, I suppose." "Does it guess easy? It must have a competition with us, my precious. If precious asks and doesn't answer, we eats it, my precious. If it asks us and we don't answer, then we does what it wants, eh? We shows it the way out, yes?" "All right," said Bilbo, not daring to disagree and nearly bursting his brain to think of riddles that could save him from being eaten.